Welcome to Imperfect, the podcast where we celebrate the cracks, the scars, and the stories that make us stronger. I'm Jeff Servello, and with me, as always, is the wonderful and talented Dr. Susan Hendrich. And today we're going to do something a little different. Instead of focusing on one specific leadership concept or challenge, we're going to open up our personal libraries and share the books that have had the most significant impact on us in our lives and our careers. This isn't necessarily the bestsellers or the books that everyone's talking about or that trashy romance novel we're going to curl up with on the beach, or if you're like me and a history nerd, something about ships in World War II. These are the books that we are often asked to recommend. Susan and I are frequently asked for, what are you reading? Or what's that thing? Or where did that idea come from? So we thought we'd crack open our libraries and share with you today. So whether you're looking for your next great read or searching for a fresh perspective, or even just curious about the ideas that have shaped us, grab yourself a cup of coffee, maybe a beer, depending upon when you're watching this episode, or if you're like me, a finger or two of bourbon on the rocks, and join us as we turn the page on our conversation about our favorite books and the lessons they continue to teach us.
This is an exciting twist today, Jeff. I love the idea of going through our personal libraries and thinking about the moments that changed us as humans, as business people, as leaders, as family members, parents, aunts and uncles. So thanks for inspiring this. And I'm curious about our listener. What's the first book that comes to mind that that changed them? And here we go with ours. And the fun part is we haven't pre-gamed this. So we might find out that we have a completely different list, or we might have some greatest hits in the making here. So let's do this.
Yeah, now I'm super excited because most of our, I want to call this out for our listener. Over Susan's left shoulder, she has a couple 5 or 6 books. And much like how something moves in Seinfeld every episode, whether you've noticed or not, Susan's books change and things change in her office. So I am frequently watching to see what has shown up or what moves around. And in fact, I'm reading one of the books that are behind her, and we'll see if it comes up. If not, I'll call it out. So, and I want to invite our listener, when you are done with the episode, drop in the comments. Hey, this is my book. These are my top 3. These are the ones I recommend the most, because we would love to share and have that sense of community with you. So you ready to dive in today, Susan?
I really am, Jeff. And I love your invitation just now. Let's create a community of, expand your mind. I cannot wait. So, all right, back and forth. Let's just name a few of them and before we jump in. I'm going to go with one that influenced me early in my career. 20 years of psychology and really focusing on the classics in the psychology space. When I started to move into the business world, I read a little book called The 1 Minute Manager.
Ooh.
And it completely altered my view of how we can influence others to bring out their best. 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. If you do nothing else as a leader, praise publicly, correct privately. Yeah. If you can just do those 2 things, you can solve a host of life's problems and needs.
Isn't that such wise advice too? Nobody wants to be diminished in public. And I say that as somebody who probably in my lesser versions of myself, in the military, they refer to it as flame spraying people. Just kind of like, was like a dragon just breathing fire on people. And sometimes it was more to prove a point than anything else. Sometimes it was, I wasn't the best version of myself as a leader in those moments. So that is great advice for all of us. Interesting. So I've never read that. Now I feel like I need to read it.
It's the best 50 minutes you can read, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, that's incredible. Is that one that you frequently recommend? Because this is actually the first time, for as much as we've talked about this is the first time that one has popped up for us.
I know, you and I are total book nerds. So why didn't this one come out? And I've thought about that because it is so ingrained in who I am and fundamental. It's not even conscious anymore. Whereas some of the other books I'm going to mention, I'm not quite expert in the concepts yet. So they're on my mind, on my shelf, in my field of vision, whereas this one just really became part of who I am. What draws us to a book? what draws us in and keeps us there, and then what keeps us coming back to it. So, your turn. Tell me about a book that's influenced your life, Jeff.
So I think the first book that I'm going to talk about is The Attributes by Rich Diviney.
Classic.
It's a great book. I had the opportunity to go to school with Rich as we were on our way to our first commands. I was on my way to command of a patrol craft, and he was on his on his way to command of a SEAL team. And I sat next to Rich, and I think in the moment, the ideas he was teaching me and the things he was sharing with me are all the kind of the basis for the book. But one of the things, and the book is centered around an idea that we have attributes, and attributes are deeper than skills, right? A skill is something I can teach you. I can teach you to parallel park. I can teach you to shoot a pistol. I can teach you to cook, but I can't teach you how to be patient. That's more ingrained. And he indexes and talks about how there are these ingrained attributes in us that you can develop over time or expose yourself to kind of cultivate, but they're not quickly changed. Where are my baseline attributes and how do they influence who I am as a leader and as an individual, and really then how I show up, right? We've talked about it multiple times on the show. I am not an inherently patient person, right? So on the attribute index of patience, that is a struggle for me to be more patient. I run a little hot. You know, the joke in my house is I'm really good in a crisis, right? If the house catches on fire, I'm very calm. Somebody spills something on the counter, probably not like very calm about that and very patient about that. A light bulb moment for me where it talks about you don't get to decide if you're a leader any more than you get to decide if you're funny or handsome, right? That's something that people will decide for you. And that really struck me because coming through the Naval Academy, playing in sports, it's like, you're a leader, you're a leader, you're a leader. That idea of like, no, I'm not. I'm not a leader. And I get really annoyed when people are like, I'm a leader. Like, no, because I really buy into this idea that Rich offers in this book is that you can put yourself in a position to lead, you can aspire to lead, you can cultivate the attributes and the skills to influence people's behavior. But leader is a title that others bestow on you when you've earned it. And that really changed my fundamental approach to the difference between positional authority of like, I'm a boss, I'm a manager, I can tell you what to do, I can control your working hours and your project load, but a leader is kind of like an honorific that you have to really earn. And the amount of time I spend thinking about that concept since he taught it to me years ago is very significant. And I've come back to that book. I probably have 3 copies of the book. I've given that book away many, many times. So yeah, that one to me is very powerful.
Knowing you as well as I've gotten to know you, there are still layers of the onion. It's just so cool to hear that in Rich Diviney and the attributes. Our very first interaction for me was over talking about Rich Diviney because while I did not get to work in his midst or learn from him during his initial teaching spaces, I was a later beneficiary of reading the attributes, being blown away by it. And then actually, I'm realizing that the attributes is the only book that I have the distinction of having purchased over 1,000 copies of, because we brought Rich in for a workshop for our senior most leaders in my former organization. A game changer if you haven't read the attributes. And Jeff, when I interviewed and got to talk to you the first time, and I learned that you were a member of kind of that thought leadership space, that's when I knew that I had so much to learn from you and that we had this cool journey ahead. So I'm grateful for that. But I'm curious about the book for you.
Sure.
And Rich's influence with the message of attributes versus skills. Besides yourself, Jeff, who do you think has benefited from your enlightenment that you gained from that book?
Oh, wow. My family. I took Rich's initial attribute assessment, and patience comes up as the first one. Recognizing where my baseline attributes were, and then understanding that there are ways to cultivate change. But even just the idea of the awareness of These are strengths, opportunities for improvement, or areas of potential pitfalls opened me up to an idea of recognizing that it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be by default. When I start to be impatient, I can do something about it. When I start to do any number of things. So I would say my family, the people that were closest to me, my work circles benefited from it significantly because that book really, probably more than any other book, started a self-improvement process or my
Wow.
self-improvement journey that I think I've been on probably for at least the last 15 years. I wanted to be better. I wanted to try to improve little things so that I could and be a better version of myself for people. And it really started with some of the contributions. And again, when Rich was like, you don't get to call yourself a leader. And I frequently steal that line and use it when I'm teaching people. I jokingly tell people I'm incredibly handsome. My mom will tell you. My wife will tell you. And I get mixed reactions from the audience. I'm like, and I know what you're thinking. Some of you are like, maybe, and others are you're like, what? And I was like, and that's exactly when it's like somebody's like, I'm the leader. I don't get to tell you that. We get really off put when people are like, I'm so funny, I'm so handsome, I'm so wonderful. That bothers us a little bit, but when people are like, I'm the leader, okay, sure. And I don't know where that comes from or why we're so quick to buy into that. But that should be something we earn. So then I wanted to earn those titles. I wanted to work on kind of the things underneath the hood, the people, my friends, my family, and the people with whom I most intimately interacted with benefited the most.
Listener, hear Jeff's moment in time. That was the book that changed everything. It was a pivot moment. If you could map your life according to the periods of time and growth and development, and what were the signature books? They teach us lessons about life, but they also teach us about ourselves. So that self-awareness unlocking that you were able to initiate and to this day you continue working on. When you were talking about you don't get to call yourself a leader, Good Morning Vietnam, when Robin Williams is in the radio station and irreverent and doing his own thing, an officer comes in and he, some respect, please. I
Yeah.
am the leader here, and everyone just busts out laughing. And the irony of the more this leader tried to bestow upon himself this honoring, the less respect he commanded. And
Yeah.
of course, Robin had zero positional authority, and he saved a nation in metaphorical terms. So, one other thing from that book that thrills me, and that is the concept of anti-fragility.
Yes.
And the reason that stuck with me so much is not it's a cool word, and the thought of being kind of trauma proof or stress proof, that kind of thing is great. But what that taught me was the greatest strength that you have turned up too loudly can get in your way. So for you, you mentioned impatience. One of the things, and I just experienced this yesterday with you, one of the things that most separates you and makes you a sought after leader, trusted advisor, right hand partner is your ability to immediately grasp the situation, find out, where the threats are, where the possible exits are, and get people to safety. That's awesome. And that turned up, it sounds like too much, is it gets your impatience button going. But there is not one attribute that we have that is a strength in peacetime that can't get us in trouble in intensity time, but vice versa. Whatever it is that we struggle with, take a look behind that mirror, because that's likely where some of your greatest strengths lie. We could talk about Rich all day.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rich Davini, for the attributes.
Yeah. So that's great point though about how you over indexed or under indexed on one or the other. And sometimes it may be a strength. What could be a strength could be a weakness, and what could be a weakness could be turned on its head to be a strength, and it's helping
Yes.
you. So how about for you? What's your next book?
Multipliers is the concept that I'd been looking for and living throughout my career, but I never had the words for it. And that is the fact that some leaders make everyone around them smarter, stronger, and more capable. And what is it about those leaders? And other leaders unintentionally drain the intelligence, confidence, and ownership in the room. So what's the difference between good leadership and ineffective leadership? And Liz Wiseman posits that it's not about proving you're the smartest person in the room. It's about creating conditions for other people to contribute what they know. And there are studies that showed that people actually get smarter in the room with a multiplier leader. And the cool part of this book is you, dear listener, all of us, can become a multiplier. Ask better questions, how you resist the urge to immediately provide the answer, rescuer, how you create healthy challenges and give people ownership instead of showing how great you are, show how great they are. That book was a game changer for me, and it came along at a time when I was moving from leading individual contributors and first line managers to leading more senior leaders, which is a different kind of leadership, building leaders who can lead others.
Can you put your finger on one or two things that book has changed in you in terms of, after reading this, I started to do fill in the blank?
Liz describes what she calls accidental diminishers that all leaders are vulnerable to. An accidental diminisher behavior is the unintended consequence of a well-intended behavior. And there are about 9 or 10 of them out there. And she has you go through a little quiz in the book, which takes 5 minutes, but it's incredibly accurate to uncover what it is that you do that you think is going to help, but actually has the opposite effect. I am guilty of 3 accidental diminishers, what's called the pace setter diminisher. My heart sank because my whole career, actually since childhood, I move fast. May not look like it, but I move fast. And sometimes by going too fast, you leave people behind. And I'm always thinking, wow, I'm creating this kind of parade of energy and let's go to this amazing place together and let me bring you along. Well, that's leading from the front. And that might get you a ribbon, but what that doesn't do is help activate and unlock in others their best work, and all they're doing is focusing on, quote, keeping up. It was a bummer reading it, frankly, because I went into a bit of a mini crisis. Like, well, if I can't go fast, how can I go far? The optimist is another one of my accidental diminishers. You can imagine, if you know me, that I have a positive disposition about life, and that serves me well many times, but it gets in the way because people think, does she really understand how bad this situation is? Can she lead in a time when people need to hear the hard, right truth? Because my natural disposition is so sunny. And find out for yourselves which accidental diminisher you find yourself with unintended consequences of well-intended behavior.
I'm halfway through it. One, I wish I had read it years and years ago, and it's not on my list because I'm not done. It's having like that moment from Price is Right, that mountain climber game, you know, where like the little thing yodels, right? Like it's climbing its way up my list. There's this theme about when you read these really good books that really challenge like your perspective, and it's almost like a mirror on the wall moment. And you're like, oh, wait a minute, I could be a diminisher at times, or I have been a diminisher, or when I read The Attributes, oh, I'm not very patient. This thing I thought I was good at, that's not an attribute of mine. These books can help us challenge the perception of our identity, and while creating space for us to grow into a different version of ourselves. What do you think about that?
In the change curve, there is a necessary valley of despair where everything you thought you understood suddenly isn't what you thought it was.
Yeah.
And you sit in that valley of despair and you can get stuck there. And the only way out is through, to start to think about a different way. And the best books that I've read are the ones that deliver on that promise. They take you into the valley of despair where everything you thought made sense suddenly doesn't, but they provide you that way out. So I'm can you see my goosebumps on my arm? I'm goosebumping as
Yeah.
you introduce that thought, Jeff. Thank you.
And I'm so appreciative that you shared that book with me.
Awesome. I'm grateful that you allowed your shelf to make space for one that you might not have naturally picked up. Isn't that the cool part about a book club? Can be a 2-minute conversation where somebody says, "Hey, I read this, check it out." In the same way that somebody can turn you on to some new music or a new show on television. So may we not only experience the book and allow ourselves to be changed, but part of the joy of being influenced by books is paying that forward. Speaking of which, what's next on your list of books?
This is a book that I was exposed to 4 years ago, and I've read it at least once a year since then. And I've started kind of this habit where around New Year's I read it as kind of a reset. And it's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And for those who aren't familiar with Ryan Holiday, he has kind of made a brand for himself by repackaging Stoic philosophy and making Stoicism accessible to the masses. What I really like about this book is he uses different parables and different examples. The underlying theme throughout it is the thing standing in your way becomes the way forward. You don't like to exercise, but you're not happy about your health. Well, congratulations, exercise is the way forward. And it can be the smallest step possible. Maybe it starts with walking to the mailbox. Maybe it starts with walking around the block. We're going to have moments in our lives where we meet challenges. The only way is through in many chances. And so it's just that reminder that sometimes you just got to pull up your big girl or your big boy pants and just go. I love that book. I share that book with as many people as possible, especially people who are going through times of crisis, because in those moments, we feel a loss of agency and we feel that our world is turned on our head. And that book for me is a grounding thing. And it came into my life when I was at a low point, this idea that, again, okay, I can turn and run from this, or I can face it head on. And when I come out the other side, I am going to be better. I don't know how, and I don't know in what ways, but by facing this thing, my success is on the other side of this thing, and I'm going to get through it.
Folks may have seen Ryan Holiday on TikTok and Instagram. One of his favorite Stoics and philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, is such a source of inspiration, and he brings a different perspective. You are starting to show something just now, Jeff, that we haven't talked about yet. One pearl strings to the next. So you read this book and it gives you this nugget. And then you read the next book and it gives you a nugget. And suddenly you start to create this interconnectivity of concepts that help you discover who you are. The timing, a period is not a sentence. And I just love that concept. A period is not a sentence. This moment in time in your life is not a life sentence to always be that way. And sometimes the book is the way through because it helps you look at your wound and address it. That's why they say it. We're going to address a wound. What you're doing is you're identifying it, you're cleaning it, you're processing it, and then you're making space for the new healing to begin. So that period of time in your life, that book came along and you were acutely ready for those concepts.
Thousands of years ago, these philosophers, right? So Marcus Aurelius, he didn't have an iPhone, didn't have the interwebs, no chat GPT, but still struggled with getting out of bed every morning to do his duty and to do his thing. Still struggled with how do I process the opinions of others. And one of my favorite quotes by him is, we love ourselves more than we love others, yet we concern ourselves more with the opinions of people we don't love as much as we love ourselves, right? So 2,000 years ago, that's something that people were dealing with. And that is still the same thing that we talk about and deal with on a daily basis. And I love the fact that reading a book about a rock in my way and how do I get around this rock can somehow then we can pull from that things that we can apply to our leadership processes. and how we want to show up in these ways to influence ourselves and others. I think about them as accidental leadership books, right? This isn't branded as a leadership book. In fact, if you go into Barnes and Nobles, it's in philosophy or self-help. It's not in the leadership, but to be able to pull something out of that and be like, ooh, that's applicable here. Or I can use this with this team, or in this circumstance, this is how I can perhaps buoy the hopes of others.
Opportunity is everywhere, and may we all start to string together the individual pearls of the books that can unlock within us thousands of years wisdom or something, today as we walk down the street. I just added a book to my list that I had not planned on choosing, but you inspired it. Can I sneak it in there?
Please, fire away. I'm excited.
This is going to sound so ridiculous. I'm going there. The book is called Chemistry, the Central Science. It is a basic chemistry book written by Brown and LeMay at University of Illinois. And this story for me is remarkable because I, majoring early in chemical engineering in undergrad and thinking I was going to follow in the footsteps of my father and become a chemist or a chemical engineer. I remember taking this class and I loved it and it all clicked and made sense. But as I moved further into organic chemistry and strength of material, other courses, there was another calling for me in the business and psychology space. But I will always be grateful to that basic science book about the building blocks, literally, of everything in our universe. But the reason that this book is so special to me is it was not until decades after I used that book that I learned that my father trained under Dr. Brown at University of Illinois. The external nature of a book and then the connection that it has to a person who inspired my interest in chemistry, it became this crazy full circle. And the grief that I had about leaving chemistry and abandoning this destiny that I thought I was supposed to have, and I had to sit down with my father and reveal to him that I was not going to be a chemist, and this was going to be this terrible conversation where he's disappointed and oh, his life is ruined. He said, "Cool, what are you going to do? You make up in your mind a should based on a script that you think someone hands you, whether it's anonymous authors of a book on chemistry or the person who most influences your career. And rarely is what you think the case to be the exact story." So the fact that books can open doors, they can create strange third door, side door entrances, and they can interweave in your life, leave your life, and then come back in very strange ways. It just struck me as you were speaking that book played a pivotal role in my life. And I will, if the house caught fire, I would bring my signed copy of Chemistry, the Central Science.
Can I ask you a tangential question that's kind of personal?
Anything.
Are you gentle on books or are you rough on books? And by that, I mean, are you the kind of person who writes all over the margins, dog ears, pages, scribbles in them? I can't even think. So maybe this is my copy of Crucial Conversations, right? There's tabs, and that's going to be one of my books that I talk about, but it's all underlined and scribbled in. It drives my wife nuts. She won't read a book if I've read it because it's all. So which are you? Are you a gentle reader, right? Or are you Lady Whistledown and Dear Gentle Reader, or are you this is my book and I'm getting my $20 out of it?
Yeah, so Talladega, I am Johnny Roughneck on books. And when you said that, it's like busted, and my husband, Tom, is the opposite. And it's funny because he loves to blow stuff up and, have fun out in the world. But when it comes to books, he would take Scotch tape and tape the corners of books to protect them from damage. Me, I'll tear a page out if I need to take it on a trip and I don't have room in my pocketbook to take it there. And my belief is that the book is a playground. It's a playing space for you to get in there and get dirty and roll your sleeves up and become changed by the book. How could the book not change as part of that process? I've been known to buy new copies of the same book multiple times, not just to give to others, which is one of my favorite things to do, introduce someone else to a book that I've loved, but also to allow that torn up, tattered, and tabbed version to serve its purpose, but then have one available. So here's an example. You and I are going to be interviewing a guest very soon,
Yes, we are.
and we both got a copy of her book, Dr. Sylvia. And look at this pristine, fresh, you know, the glue is perfectly intact on the spine. By the time we interview Dr. Sylvia, I'm quite sure that you and I can have a contest of who's gonna tear it up more. So what does Jen do? What's her approach?
She's very gentle on books, and my wife is a voracious reader. She, um, although we read very different books, she gets into books very deeply. Um, although mostly now she's a Kindle person, and but she is very gentle on books, um, whereas I prefer paper books so I can write in them. But I have discovered recently a feature in Kindle where you can highlight, you can make notes, and then you can email the notes to yourself. Because previously what I had done is I would underline, write something, take a picture, then email the picture to myself or um, coworkers who were thought partners, and we were sharing different things. And so I was actually yesterday going through I was looking for a particular picture in my phone, and I found a folder in my pictures app, book passages, and there's probably 150 pictures of like things that I had underlined that I wanted to keep that I've used in lessons and things like that. So I am hard on books, but the Kindle app and the Goodreads app have helped me to be a little bit more gentle, or to track those things in a more data friendly or distribution friendly method.
You bring up an interesting phenomenon as the history of books unfolds, and we are amidst a revolutionary period in books in these last 100 years. There was no Kindle. You think back to movable type and Moses and
Yeah.
his publication. But how we engage with a book has an impact. And knowing your love language of books, Kindle, paperback, hardback, audio, whatever your channel or medium is that speaks to you. And that might even evolve. That might evolve. Like when I'm reading fiction, I love a good trashy beach novel. And that has to be paperback because it's going to go in the trash first of all as soon as I'm done with it. But it's just get in there and do it. But I like to have a hard copy if I'm going to meet the author and I want to pass it down to my nieces. So I have different preferences. When you were describing that just now, there is a new revolution in the space of knowledge reading, and that is with the introduction of artificial intelligence. I recently was given a prompt and I tried this. I double dog dare you to try this. Take the passages that have spoken to you, feed them into Claude, ChatGPT, whatever your favorite co-pilot is, and ask the following question. Given these passages that have impacted me or inspired me over time, tell me what I should know about myself that I might not be aware of. And be prepared to be freaked out when it comes back and it says, you struggle with.
I'd be really afraid to know the answer.
I know.
Right? That talk about a mirror on the wall moment. Like, nope, I'm good. I don't want to know. I don't want to know right now. I mean, yeah, my book choices are all over the map. And so I'm equal parts interested and terrified to know what it would tell me.
The concept of metacognition, thinking about thinking AI enables us to get outside of ourselves and have a view of ourselves unlike any other technology in human history.
You know, I do want to, though, encourage the listener while you're thinking about this, if you are not using the Goodreads app, because it changed for me a couple things, right? I used to love going into Barnes and Noble, and the things I want to read, the list is far outpaces my ability to get through the material. So audiobooks is a fantastic way to, when I stopped listening to Foo Fighters when I was cutting the grass, I still love the Foo Fighters, but I was like, wait a minute, I could use this hour and a half to get through the books. Audiobook, right? The ability to consume information differently is fantastic. And I found that I will listen to a book, and if I really like it, then I'll go back and get the hard copy and then consume it more deeply. But to be able to track the books you want, or to somehow track the passages, it's kind of exciting to go back through that. As I was on that journey the other day in my app, thinking about where I was in time and space when I underlined this passage, and how that passage, when I first read it 10 years ago, how it hits differently now, but it still hits. And that, to me, I think is an interesting thought activity as well of, hey, I'm looking at this passage, and when I first read it, I'll give you an example. You talked about the passage from The Attributes about anti-fragility. When Rich first talked to me about that, and then I first read it, I thought about it in terms of building a strong team that may go into harm's way. Now when I read it, I think about it as a parent. Or I think about it from my individual coaching practices of how can I help the leaders that I work with be more resilient, to learn from their mistakes, to be able to glue the pieces of their bowl back together in a way that makes them more beautiful and more special for having gone through the things. And so it's interesting to me. So I don't know. I like to do that. I like to have those things. I like to flip through, to come over here and grab a book I've previously read and say, okay, here on page 211, this is the thing that I underlined. Why did that stick out to me? Oh, it stuck out to me because the dream is as elusive as a hole in one, but it doesn't deter 1,000 entrepreneurs from putting it all on the line.
We are in a conversation so different than what I imagined it would be, and it is amazing. And starting to think differently about reading. I thought we would go into the books. I knew we would have some cool learnings from the books, but I didn't realize how instrumental the concept of a book is in our identity, our development, our opportunity to reflect, to grow, to forgive, to put back together. What you just shared was brilliant. I don't even have my head around it yet. I'm kind of outside of the show for a moment, just thinking, wow, I've got a lot more to think about with this. Books help us make sense of the world, both inside us and around us, and they can come back again like postcards that you revisit, and the view of the cruise ship or the beach or the mountain feels differently when you look at it having been there last Thursday versus 30 years ago, and renewing your vows, so to speak, with making that connection.
They're a porthole into another world, and it's so interesting that can happen. So my next book, though, is one, and I love this one because the title, when I tell people this, I like this book, they laugh. It's called You're Not So Smart. And there's a follow-on to it called You're Now Less Dumb. And it's by a guy by the name of David McRaney. And what I really like about his books is, so that they are a book, it's a book about cognitive biases and illusions and how they work. And I came across this book because I had the opportunity to serve in a ship with a group of wonderful people. And it's funny because I was talking to them yesterday, and they want to come on the show. My former teammates.
Get in here.
And best team I was ever a part of was this group of folks. And but I had one particular person who worked for me. If they would have come in to my office and said, "Your wife and kids love you," I'd have been like, "No, they don't." Like, I had such an allergic and visceral reaction to this individual. And I'm hoping people can relate to that, and that I'm not some sort of weirdo. But I think we all can relate to why does that thing bother me so much? What is this thing? And so I wanted to dig into that And I found this book, You're Not So Smart. And I was fascinated by digging into the cognitive biases that were the scripts that were running in my mind, that are running in all of our minds, maybe without our awareness, and how they influence the decisions we make. And so I was fascinated about that. And then what's the impact that has on me as a parent? What's the impact that has on me as a little league coach? What's the impact that has on me in leadership as I'm trying to cultivate teams? So like for that person who worked for me, I recognized that I had to overcome a natural bias to be closed off to them. And when you're leading a team of people, that can be dangerous. If you're naturally think that somebody in your life is, for whatever reason, is up when it should be down, you're going to miss something that could save you. So that to me fascinates me. I could read about that stuff over and over and over again.
You just did a very cool visual image creation of the book itself and your mind, and the very tight contract you have when you're reading a book. And then when you go out a layer and you think about this group of colleagues who turned into lifelong friends, and how your recollection of the allergic reaction you had to one person then, that now you have such wisdom about the sometimes learning comes in waves. There's that concept in psychology of latent learning.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you hear a message, you have a story, you create an experience, and at the time you can't stand what you've learned or seen or witnessed. In fact, you're rejecting it and allergic to it. But then later you come back and you say, the aha moment can only happen if one door closes to allow another one to open. And it's kind of like the kid who suddenly, after years of rebelling against messages from parents, suddenly hears themselves saying to their spouse, make sure you turn the light off before you leave the room. Who have I become? But I love, first of all, I can't wait to meet your friends, because I love learning about who has shaped you. I also want to know if there's some dirt on you that hasn't surfaced yet.
Oh, there's plenty, and it won't surface.
But I love that you've included your circle of friends as part of your reading journey, and how you make sense of the world.
Yeah, I think that's the best part about it, though, right? Is being able to share stuff. I had a gentleman I worked with. His name was Pat O'Mahony. And I've known Pat since I was 16. He went to the Naval Academy with my brother. Then I had the great fortune of working with him later on in life. And Pat and I would email articles. He's one of the people that I would send the pictures of things to. Like I read this text and send it to him, or other coworkers that I've worked with, or people who've worked for me, kind of having informal book clubs. And I think that that's the beauty of this. And you're right. This conversation did not necessarily go where I thought it was going to go. And I love that. That's probably my favorite thing about our show is,
Yes.
Reading these books can be a choose your own adventure book. Find something that interests you, pull the thread. And one of my favorite things about books is when you're reading a book, oftentimes the author will share what was the book that influenced that thought. And then I love going to grab that book. It's almost like going to the source code of, if this was impactful, what was the domino that tipped this domino?
Mm-hmm.
And to then just go down these different rabbit holes of ideas and ways to cultivate yourself and expand your learning.
If the world caught fire and you could only take one book, which one would you bring?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know. I've never thought about that. I off the top of my head, it's hard because I have pictures of all the most impactful things. So I would say on my phone because I have most of them downloaded. But if I could only grab one book, and I'm looking to my left because that's where my bookshelf is with all my books. I don't know. My goodness. Don't know. How about you? Why I'm thinking, how about you?
You would think I would have had the answer to that question before I asked it, knowing
Yeah.
that it might come back to me. All right. First thought, And I kind of feel guilty about saying this, but um, I remember being a in my confirmation process, confirmation class, and hearing that the Bible will always bring you home, and kind of rolling my young eyes and oh, verily I say unto thee. And but at the same time, um, it the Bible itself is a reminder that you can read something 1,000 times. You can study it over millennia, and you will always get new and interesting perspectives on it. So, with that in mind, I would like to think of the book like the Bible and there's no book like the Bible, but a book that has that same phenomenon where when I go back to it, I get something different out of it each time. And believe it or not, it's The Wizard of Oz. And
Interesting.
that favorite movie as a kid, read the books, all the L. Frank Baum books many times. But the thing about The Wizard of Oz for me is that I thought I understood it, and I thought it was about good and evil and how you can always come home. And then along comes Wicked, and we learn that Elphaba, the Wicked Witch, isn't all bad, and Glinda doesn't have it all figured out. So
Yeah.
that's just the first thing that comes to my mind, and I probably regret it as soon as I brought that book onto the ship, because there's so many others that I
Right.
would want to read. But I'm curious about what our reader would tell us is the book that one must read before the end of days.
Yeah, that's such a wow. It's gonna sound kind of lame, but I'm really leaning towards the places you'll go.
Oh man, there's a reason why that book is graduation season. It flies off the shelf. Just yesterday, someone was talking about um, don't waste your time trying to be somebody else. Try to be yourself. And all I could hear is in my head, Dr. Seuss, there's nobody out there newer than you.
Yeah.
But that is such a great story to bring us back to who we are.
And I think why I'm struggling with this so much is the books that I've read that have been impactful, I've internalized so deeply that I don't necessarily know that I need to grab them off the shelf.
Mm.
You know, that is that. So it's, I carry parts of the attributes with me. I carry parts of You're Not So Smart with me. The Road to Character by David Brooks is one that I internalized very deeply. And there were these, you and I talked about this, and it's a topic that we're considering for a future episode, right? About peripetia, right? The moment where you have this awakening. So many of these books have given me these peripatetic moments where I have had like a boom, the light bulb went on, and a discovery to where I've really internalized them deeply. Um, and so I almost don't know that I would take any one particular book with me because I would want to find something new.
Jeff, you're practicing a concept that came from one of the craziest titled books I've ever heard of, let alone read. When I was in graduate school, the book was called If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him. And I remember our professor assigning that book and thinking, what kind of sorcery is this? I thought I was in a scientific graduate program. But that very concept you just described, which is when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And the stories and wisdom and concepts that are meant to be part of your fabric will become part of you when you read them, experience them, see them. And here we travel life's road, and we think, I'm going to get to the top of the mountain and the guru is going to tell me the meaning of life. And the idea is, along the way, if you meet the Buddha, along the way is the way, right? Circling back to what we were talking about earlier. But we cannot help but be changed, even by, I would dare say, this podcast. By joining us on this journey, I'm hoping that we have invited our listener to think about something maybe they already know, but just in a slightly different way. That's the beauty of the iterative nature of life. We get to go back to concepts again and see how they impact us differently.
Susan, I can think of no better way to end today's show than on that note. So thank you so much for sharing your insights to our listeners. Again, please drop us a note or a comment with the books that have impacted you. We would love to check them out, and who knows, maybe that'll become an impetus for one of our future shows.
Indeed. How cool if we got from our listeners some books that either we have read and it's just a reinforcement of what we love, but most exciting, something we haven't yet heard. Let us learn from you. And if this episode made a difference for you to think about a book that mattered or entice you to go and find a book that you might enjoy, we ask you to share it with somebody who might have been a reading partner with you, or who might have inspired you with passages that they've brought your way. It's been a really fun conversation, Jeff. I've really enjoyed today's episode of Imperfect, Better After Broken, the show where we celebrate the cracks, the scars, and the stories that make us stronger. I'm Susan Hendrich.
I'm Jeff Servello.
Oh, Jeff.